My cat is looking at me in the most betrayed way ever because I gave him some medicine and that was the worst thing I could have possibly done to him, apparently. Hi, it's Jade, and today I thought I would ruin my own day by reading 1-star reviews of my favourite books. Now, I first saw this being done by Kat at Paperback Dreams. I don't know if she's the one that came up with the concept, but that's where I saw it. And it's not really like a tag video or anything like that, but I thought it would be something interesting to try. But I thought this would be interesting because I don't go out looking for negative reviews of things that I love. I don't necessarily go out for positive reviews of things I love either. I just like to enjoy them in my own way and just be like, yes, I love this because of these reasons. I don't necessarily, if I'm talking to someone and they're like, yes, I loved that too, here are my reasons, I'm fully accept that. But if they're like, oh god, I fucking hated that, and then they're like listing off the reasons, I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't want to hear it. Like, it's valid. You can dislike things, that's fine. We will just leave it at, I didn't like this, and I'll leave it at, I liked this, and we will just move on. So I've picked 3 books, and I mean, I don't know how many reviews I'm going to read, probably until I feel like I'm going to cry, but we're going to go from, they're all favourites, but we're going to go from my least favourite out of the 3 to my all-time favourite, see if I can ease my way into reading horrible things about stuff that I love. The first book that I'm going to read reviews on is Ink and Bone by Rachel Caine. This is the first in the Great Library series. This series was the thing that got me back into reading after my 5-year reading slump, which is why it's very close to my heart. I don't necessarily have a specific book in the series that is my favourite, which is why I just picked the first one. So we will see what other people have to say about it. Pull up Goodreads, I probably should have done that earlier. Oh, okay, there's only 1% of people that have rated this as a 1-star. Although someone that I follow DNF'd this apparently, so. Okay, this person, I'm gonna black out their names. This person says, DNF'd at page 37, there is no warmth or heart here to keep me interested. Okay, I'm not entirely sure if you can get, obviously DNF whenever you want. Life is too short to read books that you're not interested in. But I feel like 37 pages in is not necessarily enough time to... There are certain books that are slower going. So, maybe, yeah, that's the reason I personally have a rule of get at least halfway and then decide whether it's still not got you or not. And there are certain books that I would have DNF'd after, the first chapter or so, that by I got to the midway point, I'm like, actually no, I really want to see how this ends. Okay, and as I said, made it just over 80 pages, incredibly dry and pretentious, giving up before I'm lulled into a coma. Okay. Seems to be a theme of the people that didn't like this, in that it's... I don't remember it being dry. I mean, the beginning I do think is a slow start, and then after that it gets quite adventurous, but I'm gonna have to give this a... I mean, it's been 3 years since I read the first book. So, I don't know, maybe it is a bit dry, I'm not sure. But considering one of the other books on this, dryness is not necessarily something that puts me off. That was a weird sentence. I didn't like that sentence. Is this a thing that when you DNF on Goodreads that you write the page that you DNF'd it on? I didn't know that. I should maybe do that with other ones. Okay, DNF at page 215, this person got further in. Such a shame I had to put this book down, but I couldn't get into it. I picked it up again after a couple of books and still no good. Terms aren't explained well enough, I found myself lost most of the time. It's also written very much like a middle grade novel. And I also didn't connect with any characters. It sucks so bad that I didn't like it. The premise of the story is interesting, but it just wasn't for me, I'm afraid. Fair enough. Completely honest. These are very polite 1-star reviews. Most 1-star reviews that I've read before on books that I don't like, because I'm one of those people that if I don't like it, I'm just going to find other people that agree with me, have been quite rude. This is very polite, and I'm fine with it. Okay, there are reviews here where people haven't put a star rating, and those are also saying they DNF'd, so I'm not including them in here, but most of them are just... It seems to be a lot of the same thing. It's too dry for a lot of these people. Which, if it's not your style of book, it's not your style of book. That's absolutely fine. Okay, I think we've found our first, one that's gonna... This book is an unfortunate and poorly written mashup of all the existing Mary Sue and youngsters coming of age cliches. The protagonists are one-dimensional and uninspiring. The twists are so obvious that you roll your eyes when the heroes stumble upon them instead of being shocked along with the heroes. I initially had great hopes for the main dystopic idea of a world ruled by books, but in the end, this plot just an interesting backdrop to the limpid plot. Fair? No? Kind of? I don't know, I didn't think of any of the protagonists as being particularly Mary Sue-ish. I mean, and it's young adult. It's Oh, this one wasn't the one that said it was written like a middle grade. It's definitely a young adult book, and I think sometimes they can skew a little bit Mary Sue-ish, but I don't necessarily always think that that's a bad thing. Sometimes when you go into a book, you just want wish fulfillment, and people say Mary Sues are always a bad thing, but Batman is probably one of the biggest Mary Sues I've ever seen. That was probably a bad idea to say that, but oh well. And people still love him. We're just gonna go on to the next one before it sinks in that I just said that. Disclaimer, I really like Batman. Well, actually no. Batman, not so much. Batman's villains, I think, are some of the most interesting villains in comic books, but... Okay, last one for this book, because it's finding it really hard to find 1 star for some reason. This is another DNF. After 40 pages, I'm giving up on this one. Steampunk could go either way for me. Sometimes I love it, others it doesn't really work for me. Sadly, this one was the latter. I did really like Jess's love of books, how when people would damage them, he was appalled. I don't know why I suddenly stopped being able to read then. I don't care for Jess's family at all. I mean, hard same, but I think that's kind of the point. Hated how his father put him in danger with no thought. Hated how his twins seemed to disdain him. It was, in the end, this one wasn't for me. Yeah, hard same on Jess's family, but that's kind of the point. And also his twin does get a bit of a redemption later on. So, agreement. Yeah, his family is a piece of shit, but they're also, a criminal mafia family, so they're not really supposed to be good people. Once again, maybe 40 pages is not enough to get into it, but if you're not enjoying it, I have no issue with people DNFing this. Clearly, all of these people care deeply what I think about them DNFing one of my favourite books. Clearly. Okay, so after the first book, I'm feeling fine about it, actually. Next book I'm going to go for is The Lord of the Rings. And I'm saying that like this because I have a feeling this is the one that's gonna... People have strong opinions on this book, and I am one of them, so... It's gonna be fun. Okay, the whole app just crashed, let's try that again. It was like, no, you don't want to read 1-star reviews of Lord of the Rings. Stop doing this to yourself. No, you're not looking at 5 stars. Look at 1 stars. Should I do a reading 5 stars of books I hated? That would probably be more interesting than this. Okay, we found our first 1 star. Okay. Save time, watch the movies. The book can appeal only to a linguist. The underlying story is great, but is buried under an avalanche of horribly annoying songs and poems that do nothing to advance the story. They just take up space. I diligently read every last one, hoping that they held some deep meaning in relation to the story. And if there is one, it is so obscure that it serves no purpose. Also, the book is all about walking. Yes, I know they are on epic quest, and there has to be soul-searching, etc., but the amount of detail regarding the walking is a snoozer. 45 pages of walking and 3 pages for a huge battle. I know that this is a masterpiece and I agree that the plotline is a beautiful tale of good and evil and the power and corruption. However, reading this series was a drudgery. The only really good part that you miss in the movies is when the hobbits return to the Shire in the last 2 chapters of The Return of the King. If you want a Tolkien fix, I'd recommend The Hobbit. There is a lot of walking, and that just reminded me of this TikTok that called It's My Book and They'll Walk If I Tell Them To. And I was like, as much as I absolutely love Lord of the Rings, it was like the best description of the story. Yes, there is a lot of walking in this, but you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said 4 to 5 pages of walking and 3 pages for a huge battle. That's kind of the point of Lord of the Rings, is that it's not about glorifying war and battles. There are more pages dedicated to planning a birthday party than there are to one of the biggest battles in the book. And half of that battle, it doesn't involve fighting, it's just Aragorn taunting the orcs on the battlements of Minas Tirith, which I found hilarious. Yeah, I kind of agree with you with the songs and the poems. They don't necessarily serve a purpose, but at what point in your life does every single thing you do head towards, like, the end goal? I'm, like, making air quotes out of frame, I think. But, okay, I think you went into this looking for a different thing than it is. It's not a war story. It is a story about people who survive a war, and how horrible that is, and what they went through, and how they managed to keep their humanity and their love for each other. It's not about the big battles. And if you went in there wanting to read about the big battles, you went to the wrong thing. Read fucking Game of Thrones instead. That's what you want. You want military fantasy. You don't want Lord of the Rings. But the movies are great. I agree with you there. The movies were amazing. And I do think that they made the right call in cutting out Tom Bombadil. But you're also correct in that the Scouring of the Shire is one of the best parts of the book. And also brings forth, like, one of the main evils in the book being industrialization. Seriously, I am... just, like, the more I talk about Lord of the Rings in these videos, the more I'm like, I should just make a video essay about Lord of the Rings, because then maybe I'll stop talking about it. I won't, but then I can just be like, just watch that video so I don't ramble about it in a bunch of other ones. Okay, this one doesn't have a star review, but from the first line I'm assuming this is supposed to be a 1 star. Oh, it's really long too. Okay. Those books that balloon into virulent, lethal pop culture viruses that feast on disinterested bystanders. You tried to flee them by hiding in a disused warehouse under a soiled mattress in the Democratic Republic of Congo, but Frodo and his friends will find you eventually and pull you into the lair of medieval gimps called Bilbo and Bongo. On an implausibly long and homoerotic quest for a misplaced ring. Yes, that is something that, despite how gay the movies are, and I am all for that, they're so much more gay in the books. Yes, that's why you should read the books. They're so much more gay. Did they look behind the sofa, under the fridge? What? This whole quest could have been avoided, but there's... Wait, did you read the book? They're not looking for the ring, they're trying to get rid of it. I have been physically, cosmically unable to avoid it, and that hurts. One thing I pride in my life is my ability to avoid participating in popular culture in its many tentacled forms. Since the creation of Dungeons & Dragons and games it spawned, I have been on countless pointless quests for rings. How many rings did I pick up in Sonic the Hedgehog? Millions. Computer programmers adopted this book as their Bible, and the subsequent 2 decades of game innovation took their plot templates from Tolkien. This person hasn't read this book and is one of those pretentious assholes that is like, yes, I don't read anything popular. When I left this world, a series of blockbusting films filled up the media pipes like fast-acting carbon monoxide being pumped into my front room year after year, as the endless, insufferable saga to find a missing fucking ring droned on and on, infecting comedies, dramas, films and books with references after reference after reference. How dare you, Lord of the Rings, invade my cultural happy place so brutally? Why can't you leave me alone? Your ubiquity has devalued any artistic merit the books might have had for me. Completely happy now. Wow, you must be fun at parties. Okay, yes, this has just told me I need to not read reviews of people who haven't put a star rating, because this person didn't read the book very clearly. And has it infiltrated pop culture to the point where you don't realise that it's a story to get rid of a ring, not find one? I'm so confused. I mean, your goal in that you have no fucking clue what Lord of the Rings is about has worked. I really should not complain that reviews are long when I'm talking about Lord of the Rings, because that's very hypocritical of me. Okay, first of all, I know some folk love this, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't. Everyone has different tastes. I'm liking how this starts. I read this on my second attempt. I tried first when I was in my teens and found it dull. I agree, this is... If you read The Hobbit in your teens and enjoyed it, that doesn't mean you should necessarily jump straight into The Lord of the Rings, because it is an adult book, and the language is quite dense. I'm not saying you won't enjoy it as a teen, but it isn't a book for children the way The Hobbit is. I finally read it years back in my early 30s, but although it was still dull, I gave it the benefit of the doubt and finished it. My opinion changed from dull to dull and not that big a deal. It seems to be full of long descriptions of folk walking about, yes, elf poetry, pantomime-style bad guys, hobbits. Oh, they irritate me. Ooh, okay. Ooh, that hit me where it hurts. One of the reasons that I have been, like, putting off reading the Silmarillion is that there are no hobbits in it, and the hobbits are, like, my people. I want to be a hobbit so badly. Again, I say it wasn't for me. I'm treading carefully here as I realise some folk are fairly into JRRT, learning Elvish, memorising family trees. If you're a JRRT fanboy, please reread this paragraph. But yeah, I mean, fully, have your own opinions, that's absolutely fine. And if you are someone who will, like, go off on someone for not liking something, that's wrong. I mean, if the reason that they don't like it is because they haven't seen it and they're just hating it because it's, like, the thing to do, or the opposite of the thing to do. I don't know. If they're just like, oh, I just... Like, the whole, like, Twilight thing. I read the first book and half of the second book before I went, okay, I'm not enjoying this, it's not for me, I don't like it, I'm not into either of the love interests, the writing's not very good. But there were people who never read Twilight that were like, I hate Twilight because it's popular and teen girls like it. Like, let's not pretend that the hatred of Twilight wasn't in a large part because its main demographic was teenage girls, and there is nothing teenage girls are allowed to like without being ridiculed. And I stand by that. Where was I? I got distracted. I'm not trying to insult you unless you actually translate this into Dwarfers. Okay. Merely acknowledge that these books can encourage a level of evangelical response that I recognise but don't personally get. Same, absolutely. Like, I am a Lord of the Rings fan. I am fanatical about it. I will, if someone allows me to, I will talk their ear off about Lord of the Rings. But I'm not going to, like, get mad at you for not liking it. I'm going to be sad, maybe, but people have very good reasons why they don't like this. It's a very long book, and there is a lot of walking in it. Before coming to this, I had been exposed to faster-paced fantasy tales from the early 20th century, and as a result found JRT slow, very slow. Also fair. Also, I'd read many of the sources he draws from, so found the world derivative at times. Having said that, I think that if you like big, wordy novels and haven't read any of the fantasy, this may be the thing for you. And before anyone suggests rereading Lord of the Rings, life's too short, I have other books to read, even other books that I enjoyed the first time to reread. Also fair, if you didn't enjoy it, don't reread it. Don't put yourself through that. There's no need. Yeah, I've learnt from my mistake of the other one, I'm not reading reviews that have not left a star rating. Here we go. No, I never finished a set of books. Truth be told, I can't. They're awful and horribly written. Ouch. For me, I found the author to be self-indulgent in his writing. I know many people are impressed that he made up the language, races and lands, etc. Quite frankly, big deal. Star Trek did it, as did Star Wars. I mean, that's kind of the point of like fantasy and sci-fi, is you create a world. I realise that many people say that this book, we would not have modern Dungeons and Dragons style books, games, and the many spin-offs. Again, I disagree. Just because Tolkien didn't first doesn't mean he did it best. The same could be said about a lot of things. But without them, the other things that happened better wouldn't necessarily have happened. Same as like Lovecraft originated eldritch, like cosmic horror, but he didn't necessarily do it the best. The book is a 1,000-page walk to a volcano to toss in a ring that corrupts pretty much everyone that holds it. During our walk through the various lands, we hear Frodo whine for 1,000 pages. I'm not worthy, I can't do this, it's too much, blah blah blah. Sam is there to lift his spirits and sometimes literally Frodo for the duration. Doesn't that just sound delightful? We're not going into a rant about the allegory. No, we're not doing it. Everyone is known by multiple names depending on who they encounter, which I found hard to follow. It was hard to keep the characters straight, who were related since their names were variations on each other's. Boromir, Faramir, and Steve. What? There's Eomer, Eowyn, and Beth. You get the idea. 99% of you out there will strongly disagree with me, and that's fine. I still think this book is just dull, boring, and just plain old waste of time. There are many other great fun fantasy novels out there that you should try instead. Again, if you find it boring, that's fine. A lot of people do. A lot of people, I think, go into this expecting the wrong thing. I think a lot of people go into Lord of the Rings expecting what a lot of Lord of the Rings copycats do, which is hype up the battles and the war aspect. Which, as I said before, is not what Lord of the Rings is about. People go into these big fantasy novels expecting the big battles and like glory to the heroes and things like that. Okay, the camera died on me. So I'll just finish what I was saying, which was that the whole point of Lord of the Rings is that war is not a good thing, and that heroes aren't necessarily the people that throw themselves into battles, and that being violent and wanting, even if it is for pure intentions, aka like protecting your homeland, wanting to like go and kill other people is not a good thing, and the like mental toll of being in a war that you have no control over or anything like that is really damaging and can lead to like obviously like PTSD and stuff like that. And the whole thing is like a tale about how normal everyday people get sucked into war, and it's not glorious, and it's not epic, and it's just a slog. And sometimes the hero is not the person with the highest body count, it's the person who managed to go through it all and retain his humanity. And on that note, we're going to move to the next book. So the last book, and top of the list, so we're getting more passionate about this now, is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenson. And this one is, I'm kind of scared because of the people in like real life that I know. It's like a kind of a 50-50 split as to whether you like this book or not. You either like absolutely love it, or you just... I don't think I've ever physically met someone, like as in one of my friends who's read this, that absolutely hated it. But there are a couple of people that are like, I prefer The Night Circus or whatever. Which also, that's your opinion, that's fine. Okay, this has got a higher level of 1 star than the other 2 books. Okay, here we go. I did not enjoy this at all. Pretentious, confusing, and jumping through time to make no sense whatsoever. I feel like I wasted reading week. All my anticipated releases have been flops this year. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Now, what is this book about? Honestly, your guess is as good as mine. There was a hint of some love stories, but they were so muddled into everything else that was pointless and made no sense, so who knows? Plot got lost. The writing style was so saturated in metaphors and description I got bored, and there was a million tangents that didn't add anything to the story except make you forget the story. Our main characters had potential, but that soon faded with the character arcs they were given. They're LGBT characters, but even that can't convince me to like this book. And that ending, that was some open-ended bullshit for a pointless sequel if this one sells well, and you cannot convince me otherwise. So unnecessary. Ooh, okay. I mean, I get it. It's a story about stories, and there are multiple different stories, but they do all kind of converge at the end, I think. And I mean, I fully relate into going into a book and reading it because you've been told it has LGBT representation in it. Fully get that, and I have read some absolute garbage because there was a gay character in it. But that's not. Although I'm actually really jealous that this person got given Star Sea as an arc. I finished The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. Okay, I skimmed the last 200 pages. Wow. The last 200 pages. It's not that... I was going to say it's not that long. It's like, It's not that long! It's 500 pages. You skimmed almost half of it. Okay, carrying on. Gather a library of your favourite books of literature about the joy of reading, about fantasy, with imaginative creativity. Hold on a second. That may have been Pippin. 1 second. Okay, I'm back. Where was I? Okay. Gather a library of your favourite books of literature about the joy of reading, about fantasy, with imaginative creativity, full of delightful imagery and three-dimensional symbolism. This is a very long sentence. Whether they are those novels from childhood or as an adult. Cut out the pages from all of them, then scatter the pages, throwing them into the air, then at random pick up a page and cut it into individual paragraphs. Cut out sentences that are gorgeous, or scissor out the descriptions which make your heart sing when you read them. I can see where this is going. Pick up a cut-out scrap of a sentence or paragraph at random from the resulting pile of favourite fragments, then another. Figure out what order between the two scraps works best to make a kind of progressive story being told. Paste each piece of a paragraph, sentence, description, character, which you pick up randomly out of the pile and cut up pages into a successive order, which seems to tell a story into a 600-page scrapbook. This person is not punctuating very well. From what I can gather about this really long review is they didn't like the disconnection of the story. It's not, the story isn't linear, and understandably that not everyone is going to want to read a book that doesn't, like, if you are only comfortable reading stories that work in the traditional like 3-act structure and are linear, then fine, that's what you like. Yes, I agree, this is not the book for you. Oh my God. I wanted to get some like punchy, short reviews. Everyone here has a lot of opinions, and they're in big chunks. And I shouldn't be able to complain about that because of the length of some of these books that I've put on here. Ahoy there, I enjoyed the Night Circus and I'm excited for this supposed sea yarn. And I was bored, mateys. Oh no, this person's gonna write in like pirate puns. Bored. I thought the setup for the book was interesting, but ultimately did not live up to its premise at all. There was some beautiful writing in places, especially in the short inner fairy tales, but I don't really care for most of the characters. The only one I actually liked didn't get nearly enough page time. I struggled to finish this one and almost abandoned it about 50 times. I would pick it up and read a chapter and put it back down. I kept reading because I thought if the characters didn't move me, then perhaps the world building would. But no. I have absolutely no urge to visit the Starless Sea. Other than the cats in the kitchen, there was no appeal. I mean, yes, I want that kitchen. Not much of the action ever takes place on the sea. The promised pirates and ships were lame, the descriptions of the world were repetitive, and the parts of the Starless Sea itself barely explored. I also didn't like how the story threads tied together. I thought the plot was headed that way and hoped I was wrong. The writing was also kind of choppy and fragmented and had short chapters that didn't flow well. The majority of the book just didn't make sense, and I basically hated the ending. I'd be very glad that I got this from a local library and didn't spend me hard-earned loot on it. Side note, what in the world was the purpose of the owls? Sorry, I don't have an answer for you. They were part of the fairy tales. Yeah, in all of these, there seems to be like a running narrative of why certain people disliked it. Like in Ink and Bone, it was too dry. Lord of the Rings, too long, too much walking, not enough fighting. In this one, people don't like the disconnected narrative. That was one of the things I absolutely loved, was the disconnected narrative and the fact that it all then came together at the end. And the love story just kind of like got me. I don't like this first sentence. The most boring person on earth is recruited into a masochistic secret society of librarians. Okay, the second half of that sentence saved it. I love that. Masochistic secret society of librarians. But you called Zachary boring? My baby! One of the many tests one takes to become a member is to guard a book for a few minutes. To pass this test, you have to watch the book until somebody comes to pick it up and then say, "Hey, please leave that book alone. Somebody else has their eye on it." I'm not reading the rest of this because it is a spoiler, and I didn't realise as I was reading it. Ooh. Apart from the last sentence, which is, would it really be such a bad way to go? Surely it's better way than death by lack of pace, narrative style, and characterizations. Wow. Okay, the first one that properly, like, stabbed me. Other than the person who said he hated hobbits. DNF at 203 pages. You're not my real mum and you can't make me read this. Okay. Why do I feel like that was personally aimed at me? Probably because every person I meet gets recommended this book by me. Just so you know, if you ever meet me in public, I will probably be throwing this book at you. Not physically. Oh, another big one. Okay. I don't know if I ever in my life read a book that made me so frustrated. Oh, I can recommend you a couple. The only good thing about this book is the writing style. It's very pretty, and some of the stories within this book were interesting. I agree, it is a very pretty writing style. But as a whole, this book made no sense whatsoever. It's just a string of nonsensical crap. No, not that the protagonist is the most boring character I've ever read about. He has no personality, no spine, nothing. Why do people keep equating male characters that don't want to just, like, fight all the time as being boring? No, he's a soft baby, leave him alone. And when his love interest describes him as a very interesting man, I laughed out loud. Zachary Ezra Rollins is our blank slate of a main character, and all he does in this book is just fumble along where other characters lead him. He doesn't know what he's doing or why he's doing it, he just knows that somebody told him he should do this or that, or he read in a book that he should do this or that. And let's not forget that he is the fortune teller's son, because that is the extent of his character, and the book will mention 1,000,000 times that he is the fortune teller's son. I don't remember that being so repetitive. I obviously did not clock that. But I guess it makes sense because this is the most interesting thing about him. Leave my soft boy alone, okay? All other characters were also boring caricatures, and none of them change or have any character development whatsoever. Now you're coming after Max and Dorian. Excuse you! This book has no development whatsoever, and I find that hilarious considering how many times we're told that the point of the story is change and how everything changes, and the multiple times we're told change is what a story is after all. This book feels like a scrapbook of ideas that were just thrown together in very flimsy ways and published, and all of it put together makes for a very boring and annoying reading experience. Someone didn't really. I just read one line of that. They just said the cover is somewhat meh, and I'm like, I don't know. I am very easy to please. If it has a bee on it, I'm gonna like. Very one-track mind when it comes to bees. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. This person's done like I think it's like a 3-stage review and it ended up as a 1-star. This has to be my favourite book of the year. It can't be anything less than that. and then I DNF'd it because it didn't go in the direction I wanted it to. The audacity of past Clem, time to finish it. Now I know why I DNF'd it. I'm very sorry that it wasn't what you wanted, and that it's awful going into something with really high hopes and then it just not being what you thought it was, and that kind of like ruining the experience for you. I'm very sorry about that. Okay, I think we're going to do like 2 more. Okay. Sadly, moving this one to DNF after 150 pages. Waited a long time for Morganson's sophomore effort, but this cleanly missed the mark. I've lost the ability to read. Felt a bit too self-indulgent and too much direct... Did I just say self-indulgent? Wow. Felt a bit too self-indulgent and much too directorship. Felt a bit too self-indulgent and much too directionless. Oh no, that's the word. Okay. Could have done with at least 5 of the subplots, at least 75% of the descriptions. Okay, after 150 pages, yes, it's still probably incredibly disconnected at that point. Understandable if you were like, this is just not my thing, and that you don't want to then read another, like, 300 to 400 pages, waiting for it to connect itself up, fine. DNF, 20%, lots of words going nowhere. I was 100% on board with this book for the first 1/3. I love fairy tale archetypes and quest stories and homage to books and libraries. It reminded me of Mr. Penumbra's 24-hour bookstore, which I really enjoyed. Okay. Nice recommendation, thank you. I couldn't stop listening to this book. She was listening to it on audio. And then somewhere around the halfway point, I started getting lost in the convoluted plot and lengthy description that completely bogged down the story. I don't know if this is the same for a lot of people, but if a story is quite convoluted or dense in its language, I can't listen to it. I started trying to listen to Love in the Time of Cholera, and I was like, no, this is a book I'm going to have to physically read. So I get where you're coming from with that. I don't think I could have listened to this book unless I'd already read it first once, maybe. By 75% in, I had lost the thread entirely and didn't even care what happened to the characters, but I'd already sunk 12 hours into it, so why not keep going? Also understandable there. I understand when, sunk cost fallacy and everything. If I'd been reading it in print, I would have abandoned it, but since I could do other things whilst listening to the very well-produced audio, I just kept going. The ending was so unsatisfying. Oh, I was so angry when I finished it because there's so much potential to the premise, but the writing ended up being frankly indulgent. I felt like the writer was so pleased with its own beauty that it never decided to go to work and do something productive. It was a lot of preening, and I'm not here for that. I think I hate this book. Okay. Okay. It is, I mean, I'm going to say it is probably a style over substance book. Plot-wise, it's... I mean, in the same vein that, like, Becky Chambers' books are not plot-driven, they are very character-driven. This one is very prose-driven, but I still love the characters, and I get why some people would not like the ending. It was an ending that kind of stabbed me a little bit, and I was like, that can't be where it ends. But I also don't hate endings like that, because then it just leaves me free to imagine their life continuing on, and I can... feel like I've gone past that, but okay, one more. I described this to a friend as nebulous word confetti. I stand by that. One of my biggest disappointments of the year, a very promising start develops into absolute nonsense and endless effing description. I feel like I know the smell of every scene in this book because it is described in such excruciating detail. I think that's the point, dude. I'm sorry if all that you have read is young adult novels that are not super into the descriptives, and I am a genre reader because I am interested in plot and characters. That is what okay, sorry, you just made your own point then. Fine, if that's not what you're in for, if you do just like reading a story because of the plot, not the book for you. Understandable. This is neither plot nor characters. Disagree there. Just different points in place around which the story slightly revolves. While 5,000 words are used to describe a lobby area, we are truly given no real sense of the people in this story beyond a few moments in this effing tome. Sorry, not tomb. Morgenstern is not interested in these characters beyond how they can best convey her themes in high concept fantasy. Sad. we'll end it there. Okay. I don't know. I expected to not get angry. I expected to be more saddened reading these 1 stars and have it like probably some of those did. Some of them like came for some of my babies, which like but on the whole, yeah, I'm fine. That actually made me laugh quite a bit because it definitely seemed that each 3 there was a very definitive reason why people disliked each of the 3. So I don't really know where to how to finish this now, other than I'm probably going to reread Starless Sea again soon, because it just made me, I was just like, I just want to read the beautiful words again, and I just want to read about Zachary and Dorian, because they are my children, and anyway, what time is it? You don't need to know this. It's, I don't know why I don't just stop the video. My brain stopped working now. Right. I will see you next time.